Everything seemed ordinary, but the unseen side was hiding much more. Sometimes a story begins at a moment you least expect. No one could have predicted what would happen that day. The course of life can change completely in a single moment. I never told my son about my $42,000 monthly salary. He always saw me living a simple life. One day, he invited me to dinner with his bride's family, who were visiting from abroad. So I decided I would pretend to be a poor woman and see how they would treat someone who was poor. But the moment I walked through the doors of that restaurant, everything changed. What happened that night devastated my daughter-in-law and her family in ways they could never have imagined. Believe me, they deserved it. Let me tell you how I got here. Let me tell you who I am. Because my son, Dylan, 35, never knew the truth about his mother. To him, I was always the woman who went to work early in the morning, came home tired in the evening, and cooked with whatever was in the fridge. Maybe a secretary, an ordinary person, nothing special. And I never corrected him. I didn't tell him I earned $42,000 a month. I never told him that I'd been a top executive at a multinational corporation for nearly 20 years, signing multi-million-dollar contracts and making decisions that affected thousands of people. Why would I? Money was never a trophy to me. I grew up in an era where honor was inherent and silence was more valuable than empty words. So I kept it real. For years, I lived in the same modest apartment. I used the same leather bag until it wore out. I bought clothes at thrift stores, cooked at home, saved everything, invested everything, and quietly grew rich. Because true power doesn't shout. True power observes. And I was observing very closely when Dylan called me that Tuesday afternoon. His voice was different, tense, just like when he'd made a mistake as a child. "Mom, I have a favor to ask of you. Natasha's family is coming from abroad. It's their first time here. They'd like to meet you. We're having dinner at a restaurant on Saturday. Please come." The tone in his voice bothered me. It wasn't the voice of a son inviting his mother. It was the voice of someone pleading to avoid embarrassment, to fit in, to make a good impression. "Do they know anything about me?" I asked calmly. There was a silence. Then Dylan stammered. "I told them you worked in an office, that you lived alone, that it was simple, not much." There it was. The word simple. As if my entire life could fit into that pathetic adjective. As if it were a problem for which she needed to apologize. I took a deep, deep breath. "Okay, Dylan. I'll be there." I closed it and looked around my living room. Old but comfortable furniture. Walls devoid of expensive art. A small television. Nothing that would impress anyone. And right then, I made a decision. If my son thought I was a poor woman, if my bride's family was coming to judge, then I would give them exactly what they wanted to see. I would act pathetic, naive, and helpless, a mother barely surviving. I wanted to feel firsthand how they treated someone who had nothing. I wanted to see their true colors, because I suspected something. I suspected Natasha and her family were the type to measure people by their bank accounts. And my instincts are never wrong. Saturday arrived. I wore the worst outfit I owned. A shapeless, wrinkled, pale gray dress. The kind you find at thrift stores. Old worn-out shoes. No jewelry. Not even a watch. I grabbed a faded canvas bag, pulled my hair into a messy ponytail, and looked in the mirror. I looked like a woman broken by life. Forgettable. Perfect. I took a taxi and gave the address. It was a high-end restaurant in the city's most exclusive district. The kind of place where prices aren't listed on the menu, and each table's setting costs more than the average person's monthly salary. As I left, I felt a strange sensation, a mixture of excitement and sadness. Excitement because I knew something big was coming. Sadness because a part of me still hoped I was wrong. I hoped they would treat me well, be kind, see beyond the old clothes. But the other part, the part that had worked among corporate sharks for 40 years, knew exactly what was in store for me. The taxi stopped in front of the restaurant. Warm lights, a white-gloved doorman, elegant people entering. I paid, walked out, took a deep breath, crossed the threshold, and there they were. Dylan was standing at a long table by the windows. He was wearing a dark suit, white shirt, and shiny shoes. He looked worried. Next to him was my daughter-in-law, Natasha. She was wearing a cream-colored dress with gold details, high heels, and her straight hair cascading over her shoulders. She looked impeccable, as always, but she wasn't looking at me. She was staring at the entrance with a tense, almost embarrassed expression. Then I saw them. Natasha's parents were sitting at the table, as if they were kings and queens. Mother Cordelia wore a tightly cut emerald green dress covered in sequins. Jewels adorned her neck, wrists, and fingers. Her dark hair was pulled back in an elegant bun. She had a cold, calculating beauty that was intimidating. Standing next to her was her husband, Benedict. He wore a flawless gray suit, a giant watch on his wrist, a serious expression. They both looked like they'd stepped out of a high-end magazine. I walked slowly toward them, taking short steps, as if I were afraid. Dylan was the first to see me, and his face changed. His eyes widened. He looked me up and down. I noticed him swallow. "Mom, you said you were coming." His voice was irritated. "Of course, son. Here I am." I smiled shyly, the smile of a woman not used to places like this. Natasha greeted me with a cold, mechanical kiss. "Mother-in-law, it's good to see you." Her eyes said the opposite. He introduced me to his parents in an odd, almost apologetic tone. "Dad, Mom, this is Dylan's mom." Cordelia looked up, studying me, and in that moment I saw it all. The judgment, the disdain, the disappointment. Her eyes scanned my wrinkled dress, my worn shoes, my canvas bag. At first she said nothing, simply holding out her hand. Cold, quick, and weak. "Nice to meet you." Benedict did the same. A weak handshake, a fake smile. I'm fascinated. I sat in the chair at the end of the table, farthest from them, as if I were a second-class guest. No one helped me pull out my chair. No one asked if I was comfortable. The waiter arrived with elegant, heavy menus written in French. I opened mine and pretended not to understand anything. Cordelia watched me. "Do you need help with the menu?" he asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Yes, please." I don't know what those words mean. My voice came out small and hesitant. He sighed and placed the order for me. "Something simple. Something not too expensive. We don't want to go overboard." The sentence hung in the air. Benedict nodded. Dylan looked away. Natasha fiddled with her napkin. No one said anything, and I just watched. Cordelia was the first to talk. About general things, about traveling abroad. How tiring the flight was, how different things were here. Then she began to talk subtly about money. He mentioned the hotel they stayed in, $1,000 a night. He mentioned the luxury car they rented, of course. He mentioned the shops they visited. We bought a few things. Nothing major. Just a few thousand. He was looking at me as he spoke, waiting for a reaction, waiting for me to be impressed. I just nodded. "How nice," I said. "Very nice," he continued. "You know, we've always been very careful with our money. We've worked hard. We've invested well. Now we have properties in 3 countries. Benedict has big businesses, and I manage our investments." He smiled superiorly. "So what exactly do you do?" Her tone was sweet yet venomous. "I work in an office," I replied, lowering my gaze. "I do a little bit of everything. Paperwork, filing, basic stuff." Cordelia glanced at Benedict. "Oh, I see. Administrative work. That's good. Honest work. All work is honorable, isn't it?" "Of course," I replied. The food arrived. Huge plates with tiny portions, all decorated like works of art. Cordelia cut her steak with precision. "This costs 80, he said, "but it's worth it. You have to pay for quality. You can't just eat anything, can you?" I nodded. "Of course. You're right." Dylan tried to change the subject, talking about work and some projects. Cordelia cut him off. "Son, does your mother live alone?" Dylan nodded. "Yeah. He has a small apartment." Cordelia looked at me with mock pity. "It must be hard, huh? Living alone at your age without much support? Does your salary cover everything?" I sensed the trap. "Barely," I replied. "But I'm getting by. I'm saving space where I can. I don't need much." Cordelia sighed dramatically. "Oh, you're so brave. I really admire women who struggle alone. Of course, one always wants to give more to their children, to give them a better life. But what can we do? Everyone gives what they can. Fate sometimes knocks at the most unexpected time. But this time the knocker was merciless. There it was, the subtle but fatal blow, telling me I wasn't enough for my son, that I couldn't give him what he deserved, that I was a poor, inadequate mother. Natasha was looking down at her plate. Dylan was clenching his fists under the table, and I just smiled. Yes, you're right. Everyone gives what they can. Cordelia continued. We always made sure Natasha had the best. She went to the best schools, traveled the world, learned 4 languages. Now she has a great job and earns very well. When she married Dylan, we helped them a lot. We gave her a down payment on the house. We paid for her honeymoon because that's our nature. We believe in supporting our children. He looked at me intently. So, were you able to help Dylan in any way when they got married? The question hung in the air like a sharp knife. Not much, I replied. I gave what I could. A small gift. Cordelia smiled. How sweet. Every detail counts, right? It's not the amount that matters. It's the intention. And right then, I felt the anger stirring inside me. The anger wasn't explosive. It was cold, controlled, like a river under ice. I breathed slowly, held back the shy smile, and let Cordelia speak. Because that's what people like him do. They talk, they puff themselves up, they show off, and the more they talk, the more they reveal themselves, the more they reveal the emptiness within. Cordelia took a sip of her expensive red wine, swirling it in her hands as if she were an expert. This wine is from a special region of France. It's $200 a bottle, but when you know the quality, there's no denying it. Do you drink wine? Only on special occasions, I replied, and usually the cheapest. I don't know much about these things. Cordelia smiled condescendingly. Oh, don't worry. Not everyone has an educated palate. That comes with experience, travel, education. Benedict and I have visited vineyards in Europe, South America, California. We're quite knowledgeable. Benedict nodded. It's a hobby, something we enjoy. Natasha is learning too. She has good taste. She inherited it from us. At Natasha proudly. Natasha gave a weak smile. Thanks, Mom. Cordelia turned to me. So, do you have any hobbies that you enjoy in your spare time? I shrugged. I watch TV, cook, walk in the park. Simple things. Cordelia and Benedict looked at each other again. A look of meaningful, silent judgment. How lovely, said Cordelia. Simple things have their charm. Of course, one always desires more. Don't one? To see the world, to experience new things, to grow culturally. But what can we do? Not everyone has these opportunities. I nodded. You're right. Not everyone has these opportunities. The waiter arrived with dessert. Tiny portions that looked like edible works of art. Cordelia ordered the most expensive one. $30 for a cookie-sized piece of cake. This is delicious, she said after the first bite. It has edible gold on top. See those little gold flakes? That's a detail only the best restaurants offer. Sometimes wealth is just a big lie. I ate my dessert. Simpler, cheaper. In silence. Cordelia continued. You know, I think it's important that we talk about something as a family. Since we're all here. She looked up. Her expression became serious, mock maternal. Dylan is our son-in-law and we love him very much. Natasha loves him and we respect that decision. But as parents, we always want the best for our daughter. Everything seemed ordinary, but the unseen side had much more. Dylan tensed. Mom, this isn't the time for this. Cordelia raised her hand. Let me finish, son. This is important. He looked at me. Look, I understand you're doing the best you can with Dylan. I know it can't be easy raising him alone, and I really respect that. But Dylan is in a different phase of his life now. He's married. He has responsibilities. And he and Natasha deserve to have stability. Stability? I asked softly. Cordelia replied, financial, emotional stability. We've been very helpful and will continue to be. But we also believe it's important that Dylan doesn't carry unnecessary burdens. His tone was clear. He was calling me a burden. I, his mother. Natasha was staring at her plate as if she wanted to disappear. Dylan's jaw was clenched. Loads? I repeated. Cordelia sighed. I don't want to sound harsh, but at your age, living alone on a limited income, it's natural for Dylan to worry about you, to feel he needs to take care of you. That's good. He's a good son. But we don't want this worry to affect his marriage. Do you understand me? Perfectly, I replied. Cordelia smiled. I'm glad you understand. That's why we wanted to talk to you. Benedict and I thought of something. She paused dramatically. We can help you financially. We can give you a small monthly allowance, something that will allow you to live more comfortably, without Dylan having to worry so much. It will be modest, of course. We can't perform miracles, but it will be a boost. I remained silent, watching him waiting. He continued, and in return, we just ask that you respect Dylan and Natasha's space. We ask that you don't call them too hard, don't pressure them. Give them the freedom to build their lives without interference. How does that sound to you? There it was. The offer. A bribe disguised as charity. They wanted to buy me. They wanted to pay me to disappear from my son's life, so I wouldn't shame their precious daughters with my poverty. Dylan exploded. Mom, that's enough. You don't have to. Cordelia cut him off. Marcus, calm down. We're talking like adults. Your mother understands, right? I picked up my napkin, calmly wiped my lips, took a sip of water, and let the silence grow. Everyone was staring at me, Cordelia with anticipation, Benedict with pride, Natasha with shame, Dylan with despair. And then I spoke. My voice sounded different. It wasn't shy anymore. It wasn't small anymore. It was determined, clear, and cold. That's an interesting offer, Cordelia. You're truly generous. Cordelia smiled triumphantly. I'm glad you see it that way. I nodded, but I have a few questions. Just to be clear. Cordelia winked. Sure. Ask whatever you want. I leaned forward slightly. Exactly how much would a modest monthly allowance be? Cordelia hesitated. Well, we were thinking $500, maybe $700 depending. I nodded. I understand. $700 a month to disappear from my son's life. Cordelia frowned. I wouldn't say that, but that's exactly what you said, I replied. Even though that day seemed like an ordinary day, fate had different plans. He straightened in his chair. I don't want you to misunderstand. Sure, I said. Help? How did you help with the down payment? How much was it? Cordelia nodded proudly. Actually, 40,000. Oh. $40,000. How generous. What about the honeymoon? 15,000, Cordelia said. A 3-week trip to Europe. Amazing. Truly incredible, I replied. So you invested approximately $55,000 in Dylan and Natasha. Cordelia smiled. When you love your children, you don't hesitate. I nodded slowly. You're right. When you love your children, you don't hesitate. But tell me something, Cordelia. All this investment, all this money, has it bought you anything? Cordelia blinked in surprise. Like what? Did he buy respect? I continued. Did he buy real love or just obedience? The atmosphere changed. Cordelia stopped smiling. Excuse me? My tone became sharper. You've been talking about money all night. How much it costs. How much you spend. How much you have. But you never once asked how I was. If I was happy. If anything hurt. If I needed some companionship. You just calculated my worth, and apparently I'm worth $700 a month. Cordelia turned pale. I didn't say that. Yes, you did. I interrupted. Yes, you did. You've been measuring my worth by your wallet ever since I got here. And you know what I discovered, Cordelia? I discovered that people who only talk about money are the ones who least understand true value. Benedict interjected. I think you're misinterpreting my wife's intentions. I looked at him directly. So what were their intentions? To take pity on me? To humiliate me throughout dinner? To offer me alms so I could get lost? Franklin opened his mouth but said nothing. Marcus was pale. Mom, please? I looked at him. No, Marcus. Please don't. I'm at the end of my silence. I placed a napkin on the table. I leaned back in my chair. There was no longer any shyness in my posture. No more shrinkage. I looked Cordelia straight in the eyes. She held my gaze for a second, then quickly looked away uncomfortably. Something had changed, and she sensed it. Everyone felt it. Cordelia, you said something very interesting a minute ago. You said that you admire brave women who struggle alone. Cordelia nodded slowly. Yes, I did. Then let me ask you something. Have you ever struggled alone? Have you ever worked without your husband's support? Have you ever built something with your own hands, without your family's money? Cordelia did not stutter. I have my own achievements. Like what? I asked with genuine curiosity. Tell me. Cordelia smoothed her hair. I manage our investments. I oversee the properties. I make important decisions in our businesses. I nodded. The businesses your husband built, the properties you bought together, the investments made with the money he generated. Or am I wrong? Benedict interrupted angrily. That's not fair. My wife works just as hard as I do. Of course, I replied calmly. I don't doubt it works, but there's a difference between managing money that already exists and creating it from scratch. There's a difference between overseeing an inherited empire and building it brick by brick. Don't you agree? Cordelia pursed her lips. I don't see where you're going with this. Let me explain, I replied. 40 years ago, I was 23 years old. I was a secretary for a small company. I was making minimum wage. I was living in a room I rented. I ate the cheapest food I could find. And I was completely alone. As time went on, everything became more complicated. Marcus looked at me intently. I had never explained this to him in such detail. I continued. One day I got pregnant. My father disappeared. My family turned their backs on me. I had to decide whether to continue or not. I chose to continue. I worked until the last day of my pregnancy. I went back to work 2 weeks after Marcus was born. A neighbor looked after him during the day. I was working 12-hour days. I stopped and drank some water. No one spoke. I didn't stay as a secretary. I studied at night. I took courses. I learned English at the public library. I learned accounting, finance, management. I became an expert in things no one taught me, all on my own, while raising a child alone, while paying the rent, the food, the medicine, the clothes. Cordelia stared at her plate, her pride beginning to crumble. And you know what happened, Cordelia? I climbed the ranks little by little, from secretary to assistant to coordinator to manager to director. It took me 20 years. 20 years of working tirelessly, with sacrifices you can't even imagine. But I did it. And do you know how much I earn now? I asked. Cordelia nodded. $42,000 a month. The silence was absolute. It was as if the universe's pause button had been pressed. Marcus dropped his fork. Natasha's eyes widened. Benedict frowned in disbelief. And Cordelia froze, her mouth slightly open. 42,000, I repeated. Every month? For almost 20 years. That's about $10 million in gross income over my career. Not counting investments, not counting bonuses, not counting company stock. Cordelia blinked a few times. No, I don't understand. You make $40,000 a month? True, I replied calmly. I'm a regional operations director for a multinational corporation. I oversee 5 countries. I manage budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I make decisions that affect over 10,000 employees. I sign contracts you can't read without a lawyer. And I do it every day. Marcus was pale. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me? I looked at him with compassion. Because you didn't need to know, my son. Because I wanted you to grow up valuing effort, not money. Because I wanted to raise you as a person, not an heir. Because money corrupts, and I didn't want you to be corrupted. But then, Natasha whispered, why do you live in that tiny apartment? Why do you wear simple clothes? Why don't you drive a fancy car? I smiled. Because I don't need to impress anyone. Because true wealth doesn't show. Because I've learned that the more you have, the less you have to prove it. As the story deepened, the mask on everyone's face slowly began to fall. At Cordelia. That's why I dressed like this tonight. That's why I pretended to be poor. That's why I pretended to be a poor, naive woman. I wanted to see how they would treat me if they thought I had nothing. I wanted to see your true face. And child, I saw it perfectly. Cordelia was red with shame, anger, and humiliation. This is nonsense. If you earn that much money, we'd know. Marcus would know. Why would he believe you were poor? Because I let him, I replied. Because I never talk about my work. Because I live simply. Because I invest the money I earn. I save it. I grow it. I don't spend it on fancy jewelry or show off at expensive restaurants. Franklin cleared his throat. That still doesn't change the fact that you were rude. You misinterpreted our intentions. Really? I stared at him steadily. Did I misinterpret it when you said I was a burden to Marcus? When you offered me $700 to disappear from his life? Every single snide comment about my clothes, My work, my life? Franklin didn't answer. Neither did Cordelia. I stood up. Everyone looked at me. Let me tell you something no one ever says. Money doesn't buy classes. It doesn't buy real education. It doesn't buy empathy. You have money, maybe a lot of it, but you lack a shred of what really matters. Cordelia stood up angrily. And you are the ones? You who lie to us, deceive us, make us look like fools. I didn't make you look like a fool, I replied coldly. You did that on your own. I simply gave you the opportunity to show who you were, and you did it magnificently. Natasha had tears in her eyes. Mother-in-law, I didn't know. I know, I interrupted. You didn't, but your parents knew exactly what they were doing. They knew how to humiliate me, and they enjoyed it. Until they discovered that the poor woman they were humiliating had more money than they did. And now they don't know what to do with that knowledge. Cordelia shivered. You have no right. I have every right, I replied. Because I'm your son-in-law's mother. Because I deserve respect. Not because of my money, not because of my job, but because I'm a human being. That's something you forgot during dinner. Marcus stood up. Mom, please let's go. I looked at him. Not yet, son. I'm not finished yet. At Cordelia, you offered to help me with $700 a month. Let me make you a counteroffer. I'll give you $1 million. If you can prove to me that you're kind to someone who has no money. As tensions increased, people began to have difficulty hiding the truth. Cordelia opened her mouth, closed it, and said nothing. Absolutely, I replied. You can't. Because to you, people's value is measured only by their bank accounts. And that's the difference between you and me. I built wealth. You just spend it. I earned respect. You buy it. I have honor. You have bank accounts. I picked up my old canvas bag. I pulled out a black and platinum credit card. I placed it on the table in front of Cordelia. This is my corporate card. Unlimited. Pay for the entire meal with it. With a generous tip. Consider it a gift from a poor, naive mother. Cordelia looked at the card as if it were a poisonous snake. It was black, shiny, with my name engraved in silver letters, Eleanor Sterling, Regional Director. His hand trembled slightly as he picked it up. He turned it over, examined it, then looked at me. His eyes no longer had that superior sparkle. There was something different now, something I never thought he'd see. Fear. I don't need your money, Cordelia said, her voice breaking. I know, I replied, but I didn't need your pity either. You've been offering it to me all through dinner anyway, so take it as a gesture of courtesy, or etiquette, something you clearly haven't learned in all your European travels. Benedict tapped the table. Enough. This is getting out of hand. You're disrespecting us. Respect? I repeated. Funny you're using that word now. Where was your respect when your wife asked if my salary was enough to live on? Where was it when she implied I was a burden to my son? Where was it when she offered to buy me off and make me disappear? Franklin clenched his jaw. Cordelia just wanted to help. No, I corrected. Cordelia wanted to control. She wanted to make sure the poor mother wouldn't ruin her daughter's perfect image. She wanted to eliminate the weak link in the chain. The problem is, she chose the wrong link. At Natasha, her head was bowed. Her hands were shaking in her lap. Natasha, I said softly. He raised his head. Tears were streaming down his cheeks. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't know my parents would be like this. Don't finish that sentence. I cut him off. Because you knew. Maybe not about my money, but you knew what kind of people your parents were. You knew how they treated people they considered inferior, and you did nothing to stop them. Natasha sobbed. I wanted to say something, but they're my parents. It was slowly becoming clear that there was a much greater meaning behind everything. I know, I replied. And Dylan is my son, but I still let him make his own decisions. I let him choose his life, his wife, his path, because that's how love is shown. With freedom, not with money, not with control, not with manipulation. Marcus moved closer to me. Mother, forgive me. Please forgive me for never asking, for assuming, for thinking you were. His voice broke. I hugged him. You don't have to apologize, son. I did what I did for a reason. I wanted you to be independent, to value the right things, to not be financially dependent on me, to have your own life. But I made you think you had to protect me, Marcus said, and that wasn't wrong. because that's how you learn to care, to worry about others, to be empathetic. These are lessons money can't buy. Marcus hugged me tightly. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I love you, son. I always have. I always will. It doesn't matter how much money I have or how little I have, because love has no price. And that's a lesson Cordelia and Benedict will never learn. Cordelia still stood stern, watching this scene with a mixture of astonishment and suppressed anger. That doesn't change anything, he said finally. You lied. You deceived us. You came here with ulterior motives. You acted in bad faith. That's right. I nodded. I was pretending. I was pretending to be something I wasn't. Like you do every day. What does that mean? Franklin asked. You hide behind your money, behind your jewelry, behind your travels, behind everything you can buy. But inside you are empty. You have no deep conversations. You have no real interests. You have nothing to offer but your bank account. Cordelia gave a dry, bitter laugh. Coming from someone who's been lying all night, that's hypocrisy. Maybe, I replied, but my lie revealed the truth. Your truth. And now you can't hide. Now you know I see you. You know I feel every comment. You know I store every insult disguised as advice. And you know I'll never forget that. The waiter approached timidly. Excuse me, would you like anything else? Franklin nodded sharply. Just bring the bill. The waiter nodded and disappeared. Cordelia sat back defeated. Her posture was no longer graceful. It was that of someone who had just lost something important. And it wasn't money. It was power. Eleanor, he said in a softer, less aggressive voice, I don't want this to ruin the relationship between our families. Marcus and Natasha love each other. They have a life together. We can't let this happen, I snapped. Ruin your plans. Reveal what you really think. It's too late for that, Cordelia. The damage is done. But we can fix it, he insisted. We can start over. No. I cut him off harshly. We can because I know who you are now, and you know who I am. And that truth can't be erased with empty apologies or fake smiles. You treated me like trash, and you enjoyed it because you thought you could. Franklin cleared his throat. You were the one who lied. You were the one who instigated this situation. You're right. I nodded. I provoked it because I needed to know. I needed to confirm what I already suspected. That you're not good people. That your money doesn't make you better. That you are exactly the kind of people who look down on others for not having the same things. Cordelia wiped away a tear. We're not bad people. Maybe not, I replied. But you're definitely not good either. And there's a huge difference between those two things. The waiter returned with the bill and left it in the middle of the table. No one touched it. Cordelia glanced at my black card, still in their hands, then at me. I won't use your card, she said. We'll pay our own bills as we always do. Perfect, I replied. Then keep that card as a souvenir. A reminder that not everything is as it seems. A reminder that the woman you've been scorning all night is so much more than you. And I'm not just talking about money. Cordelia dropped the card on the table. I don't want this. I don't want the moralizing either. I pushed the card towards him. Take it anyway, because it tells me that someday you will meet me. You will find someone who pretends to be less than you are, and you will make the same mistake again. Because people like you never learn. Franklin pulled out his wallet and pulled out several credit cards, all gold, all shiny. He selected one and placed it on the bill. The waiter took it and left. No one spoke during those minutes of waiting. The silence was thick, uncomfortable, and heavy. Natasha wept silently. Marcus held my hand. Cordelia stared at the wall. Franklin checked his phone, avoiding eye contact. The waiter returned. Sir, your card has been declined. Franklin looked up sharply. How was he rejected? The waiter repeated. Rejected. Do you have another form of payment? Franklin turned bright red. This is impossible. This card has an extremely high limit. It must be a system error. The waiter shrugged. I can try again if you like. Franklin gave him another card. The waiter left. As the minutes passed, the unease within everyone grew. Cordelia looked at her husband angrily. What happened? I don't know. Franklin replied irritably. It must be a bank error. When you travel, they sometimes freeze your account for security reasons. Sometimes it happens. I nodded understandingly. Of course. These things happen. How unfortunate. The waiter returned again. I'm sorry, sir. This has also been rejected. Franklin stood up. This is ridiculous. I'm calling the bank right now, He stormed out of the restaurant. Cordelia sat there, ashamed and humiliated. "This has never happened to us," she muttered. "Never." "What terrible timing," I commented callously. Marcus looked at the bill. "Mom, I can pay." "No." I cut him off. "You won't pay anything." I took out my wallet. A simple old leather wallet. I pulled out another card. This one wasn't black. It was transparent, made of heavy metal. A card less than 1% of people in the world own. I placed it on the table in front of Cordelia. He looked at her. His eyes widened. He realized what had happened. "This is a Centurion card." "That's right," I replied. "American Express special invite. $250,000 minimum annual spending requirement. $5,000 annual fee just to own it. And perks you've never even dreamed of." Cordelia said nothing. The waiter carefully took the card as if it were a sacred thing. He returned in less than 2 minutes. "Thank you, Mrs. Sterling, everything is taken care of. Would you like the receipt?" "No need," I replied. The waiter nodded and left. Cordelia continued to stare at the space where the card had been. I stood up, grabbed my old wallet, my canvas bag, and took one last look at Cordelia. The food was delicious. "Thanks for the restaurant recommendation. And thanks for showing me exactly who you are. You saved me so much time, energy, and future disappointment." Cordelia finally looked up. Her eyes were red, not from crying, but from suppressed anger. "This isn't ending here," she said, her voice trembling. "You can't just insult us and walk away as if nothing happened. Natasha is our daughter. Marcus is our son-in-law. We will still be family. You have to see us." "You're right." I smiled. "I'll have to see you at birthdays, Christmas, and family gatherings. But I'll see you differently from now on. I won't have to worry about what you think of me anymore. I already know. And you know I know. And you'll live with that. Every time you see me, every time you try to act nice, you'll remember tonight." Franklin returned to the table. He had his phone in his hand. His face was pale. "There's a problem with the accounts," he said. "It's a temporary hold for security reasons. It'll be cleared tomorrow." He looked at the table. "Did they pay?" Cordelia replied without looking at him. "He paid?" Franklin looked at me. His pride was crushed. "Thank you," he muttered. It was barely audible. "You're welcome," I replied. "That's what family is for, right? To help each other out. Especially when someone needs a little extra money. Let's say $700, or in this case, the $800 this meal costs." Franklin closed his eyes. Cordelia clenched her fists in her lap. Marcus moved closer. "Mom, let's go please." "That's enough." I looked at him. "You're right. That's enough." To Natasha. She was still crying silently. "Natasha," I said softly. He raised his head. "You are not responsible for how your parents are. No one can choose their family. But you can choose how you act, how you treat others, how you raise your children one day." Natasha nodded through her tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. "Don't ever apologize again," I told her. "Just learn. Learn that money doesn't define a person. Learn that humility isn't a weakness. Learn that respect for others doesn't cost anything. And if you ever have children, teach them to see people's hearts, not their bank accounts." Natasha sobbed harder. Marcus hugged her. Cordelia looked away. Franklin avoided eye contact and checked his phone again. I headed for the exit. I took a few steps, then stopped and turned around one last time. "Oh, Cordelia, one more thing." He looked at me. "Remember when you said you spoke 4 languages?" Cordelia frowned. "What does this have to do with anything?" "I was just curious," I replied. "Which of those 4 languages did you learn to be polite in? Because clearly it wasn't in any of them." Cordelia opened her mouth, but no words came out. From that point on, nothing seemed like a coincidence. "Absolutely," I said. "You can speak 100 different languages and still not have anything worth listening to." I left the restaurant. Marcus walked beside me. The night air hit my face. I took a deep breath. I felt as if a huge weight had been lifted off me. Not a physical weight, but an emotional weight. The weight of pretending, of tolerating, of remaining silent, of being less than I was. Marcus took my arm. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm perfect," I replied. "Better than ever." "What about you, Marcus?" Marcus sighed. "I don't know. I'm processing everything. I can't believe you never told me about your job, about your money, about everything you've accomplished." I stopped and looked him in the eyes. "Does this bother you?" He shook his head quickly. "No, of course not. I'm proud. incredibly proud. But I also feel stupid, blind. You're not stupid, I told her. You only saw what I wanted you to see. And I did that on purpose because I needed you to grow up without being dependent on me, without feeling like there was a financial safety net waiting for you. I needed you to struggle, to work, to appreciate everything you'd achieved on your own. Marcus nodded. I understand. But now I also understand why you never complained. Why you never asked for help. Why you always seemed so calm. Because you didn't need anything. I smiled. I needed a lot of things, son. It's just that none of them could be bought with money. I needed to see you grow up. I needed to see you become a good man. I needed to see you make the right decisions. And I did. Even if you married Natasha, Marcus asked in a weak voice. Even if you marry Natasha? Even if you marry Natasha, I replied. She's not her parents. She can learn. She can change. But that's up to her and up to you. It depends on how you build your relationship. What values you choose to follow. Marcus remained silent, processing, thinking. A taxi pulled up in front of us. I'd called a rideshare on my way out. I opened the door. Marcus stopped me. Mom, can I ask you something? Certainly. Why did you do it? Why did you come pretending to be poor? Why didn't you tell them the truth from the start? I closed the taxi door. I turned to him. Because I needed to know, son. I needed to confirm whether my suspicions were true. I needed to know if Natasha's family was really what I'd imagined. And sadly, I was right. Marcus lowered his gaze. I apologize. You don't have to apologize for them, I told him. But you do have to decide what kind of husband you want to be. What kind of father you want to be someday. What do you mean? He asked. I mean, you just saw two very different ways to use money and power. Your mother-in-law's and father-in-law's way and mine. They use it to control, to humiliate, to feel superior. I use it to gain freedom, to help without ostentation, to live in peace. You decide which way you want to follow. Marcus nodded slowly. I understand. I opened the taxi door again and got in. I rolled down the window. Marcus approached. Mom, one last question. Like this. Will you ever forgive Cordelia and Franklin? I thought for a moment. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, I replied. It doesn't mean letting it happen again. One day I might forgive them. When I see real change. When they start seeing people as people, not numbers. But until then, I'll just be polite, distant, and extremely careful. Marcus asked, do you forgive me for not asking, for assuming, for letting this meal happen? I looked at him with compassion. Son, there's nothing to forgive. You did what you thought was right. You wanted your parents to meet. That's good. What happened next wasn't your fault. It was theirs. And partly it was mine because I decided to play their game. Marcus smiled slightly. You win. I won. I nodded. But I don't feel victorious. I feel tired and sad because I just confirmed something I didn't want to confirm. That some people will never change. That some families are broken even with money. That there are holes no bank account can fill. The taxi driver cleared his throat. Lady, should we go? Yes, I replied. Give me a second. I took one last look at Marcus. Go to Natasha. Talk to her. Listen to her. Support her. But be honest too. Tell her how you feel tonight. Tell her what you expect from her and her family. Because if you don't set boundaries now, this will happen again and again. Marcus promised. I love you, Mom. And I mean it more than ever now because now I know who you really are. And you are incredible. I smiled. I love you too, son. I always have. I always will. It doesn't matter how much money I have or how little I have. Because love has no price. And that's a lesson Cordelia and Franklin will never learn. Marcus walked away from the taxi. I signaled to the driver. We can go. Every piece of information that came out took the story in a completely different direction. The taxi pulled away. I looked out the window. Marcus was walking back toward the restaurant, his shoulders slumped, thoughtful. He was probably going back to find Natasha, to confront his mother-in-law, to have some difficult conversations. And I felt proud because it meant he was maturing. He was learning. He was choosing to be better than the example he'd just witnessed. The taxi passed through the brightly lit city streets. I closed my eyes and thought about everything that had happened. Every word, every look, every tense moment. And I asked myself if I had done something wrong. If I had been too harsh, too cruel, too vindictive. But then I remembered every hidden insult, every snide comment, every look of contempt. And I realized, no, I wasn't too much for anything. I was just being honest. Finally, the taxi was winding its way through the empty night streets. The lights of the buildings flashed past the window. I opened my old canvas bag and took out my phone. A simple phone. Something unassuming. Something inconspicuous. I had 3 unread messages. One from my assistant asking about the Monday meeting. Another from a colleague congratulating me on a closed contract. And one from an unknown number. I opened the unknown message. It was from Natasha. Mother-in-law, please forgive me. I didn't know my parents would be like this. I'm embarrassed. I need to talk to you, please. I stared at the message for a long time. I considered responding. Then I decided not to. No, he still needed time. And so did I. Words spewed from guilt rarely carry any real meaning. Real change takes time, thought, and consistent action. I put my phone aside. The taxi driver looked at me in the rearview mirror. Excuse me, miss. Is everything okay? I looked at him. Yeah. Everything is fine. Why? You got in very quietly. Normally people coming out of that restaurant are happy, talking about how good the food was. The driver said, "You look different." I looked out the window. The streetlights were falling behind one by one. Sometimes, I said slowly, the heaviest meals sit not in your stomach, but in your heart. The driver remained silent. He didn't continue. His silence was a kind of respect. I leaned my head back. I took a deep breath. Tonight felt like I'd just been through a war, but for the first time, I'd fought for myself, without hiding, without being silent, without being crushed. And strangely, I felt free. There might have been pain, perhaps disappointment, but the weight was gone. When the taxi stopped in front of my house, the driver glanced at me in the mirror. "Good evening, ma'am. I hope tomorrow will be easier." I smiled. "It will happen," I said, "because tomorrow I won't be carrying anyone's mask." I opened the door, the cold air hitting my face. I slung my bag over my shoulder and walked home. Only one thought in my mind. This night wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The next step would be to see who was truly family, and who was only related by blood. When I closed the door, silence greeted me. But for the first time, that silence wasn't loneliness. It was peace. And no card, no account, no power could buy its value. The decisions made that day completely changed the direction of the future. Nothing would ever be the same again. Everyone had to accept their share of the consequences. When the truth came out, all the silences became meaningful. And that was the moment when the story ended in the most unexpected way.